Pre-sales teams are being asked more and more to do post-sale work. Now, this isn't new. I mean, my entire time when I was a solutions consultant myself, I had many a time where I had to either work with existing customers or work with the post-sales team on something we said we would deliver during the sales cycle, or even help with some implementations. But now it's actually becoming a part of many SC's actual job responsibilities. And this goes beyond even the forward deployed engineer roles, which is set up because of more of a consumption-based model. We're talking about an organization realizing that some of their most value-centric, use case-centric people who can communicate ideas and keep people focused on getting an actual product installed and up and running is your pre-sales teams, right? We've got a little bit of that charisma. We've got a little bit of that additional ability to get people to want to move and do something. And that's exactly what you need to get a customer on board sometimes. And so that's why I think we're seeing a lot of this coming together of pre and post sales that's going to continue, whether or not you adopt the forward deployed engineer or not. And that's exactly what we talked about on today's episode of the Pre-Sales Podcast. Welcome everyone to the show. My name is Jack Cochran, General Manager of Presales Collective and your host of the Pre-Sales Podcast. Today I was joined by Shamil Turner, who is on Presales Collective's advisory board and the global technical solutions leader at Figma. He was actually, I think, the first SC at Figma, helped to grow and build that SC organization, and now has moved over into more of a post-sales technical role because of, like I said, this combining of solutions with post-sales. And we talked a lot about that, what it means, and things that you should be thinking about, regardless of what your role is, whether you are the person in charge of making these decisions or you're an individual contributor, maybe just getting started. These are things you're going to know because the world of solutions is changing in one way or the other because of everything going on right now. And that's a lot of what we talked about. But I don't want to get in your way. Please do check out Shamil on LinkedIn. Connect with him. He's absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed getting to know him over the past few years, but I will get you right to the episode right after the break. Salio is a leading demo experience platform trusted by some of the largest software brands. Through a single unified AI-powered platform, companies can run high-stakes live demos in their native product, creating self-service tours and delivering conversational autonomous demos 24/7. Salio empowers pre-sales, sales, and marketing teams to close deals faster by reducing demo prep time, shortening sales cycles, and enhancing demo satisfaction. Check them out today at salio.io. Shamil, welcome to the Pre-Sales Podcast. So excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here on this rainy New York afternoon.
It is unfortunately a lot colder than I like it when I'm traveling here, but we're inside at least. So out of the rain, staying dry.
It's necessary. We got to wash all this dirty snow around.
It is definitely that time of year when we're recording it, at least here in March. The snow is at that point where it's like that really slush that just sits there forever without the rain. So I agree. It's good to get rain to get rid of that.
Yeah, let's clean up New York, please.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of your role. And I think that's part of the fun when we were talking about, hey, what could we talk about in the podcast, was right as you were starting to shift your job. You'd spent over 4 years being the first SC at Figma, building that team from the ground up. What prompted you to make the leap into what you do now in post-sales with technical account management?
So to begin with, think about 4 years in a startup.
That's a long time. That is like forever.
Yeah. So it's like you seek new opportunities to grow, to challenge yourself. And with Figma, I think they launched a wealth of new products back in May. And it just became necessary to kind of think about what is that value realization stage in the business. So for me, it's like almost coming full circle. I started my career out as a systems engineer, where I was focused on building hypervisors and virtualization before people really trusted GCP, Azure, AWS. And it's just like full circle to think about the constraints I had to deal with back then. And then the vision that people came in and sold to versus like what were the actual reality of deployment? What's the reality of adoption? How do you roll something out when you think about people, process, and tooling? So blending both roles throughout the 4 years of Figma, the focus was definitely adoption, but also vision setting as we were building new products. It was important to think about that tail end of like the actual adoption setting and making sure that we can build a team that was laser focused on not just what Figma could do, but what was the ecosystem of product development. And I was really excited to take that leap to, number one, strengthen the world of technical solutions and my ability, but also to build something new.
No, that's great. I can't imagine that 4 years as a startup, as you say, that is such a long time. And I think it's always important to be focused on how am I learning? How am I growing? A lot of what we're seeing right now as I'm talking to a lot of people, I think the move you made is the move that a lot of companies are kind of making right now, like kind of thinking about post-sales less as a, well, they're a customer now, we can whatever, we'll get them deployed, and more of, we need to have more of a sales thought to how we approach our existing customers. What's surprised you as you've gotten into the role that you didn't think was going to be there?
The expectation of the individual employees that you're targeting and hiring means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it's like making sure you're setting the right expectations so they can operate within the model that you're building. So that was the biggest thing. But when it comes to customers are so energetic about solving their problems. So when you're in like this pre-sales role, you discuss quite a bit about validation and vision setting when it comes to this is what we're positioning to you, and this is why it will enhance all of your processes, and this is how much value you're going to get out of this. But in post-sales, it's like you have to anchor on who's available and who's willing to show up, and then work with them to get them as close as possible to the vision that was set earlier stage. So the thing that surprised me the most is like the energy. The executives at the top don't always show up post-sales. You're now trying to work bottoms up to get a large swath of customers and end users adopting the workflows that you positioned. And it's hard to coordinate across all those people. It really becomes less of a what the tool can do at a business outcome level down to how can we alter individuals and their default state of work. And that's the hard part. That's where all the nuance, and you have to be critical about the details, how you're presenting the right content, how they can adopt the tools. And that's the piece that kind of surprised me the most. It's like, oh, you can't go in with the same playbook.
You definitely can't. I mean, the playbook that we typically have in sales is when you're fully up, fully deployed, fully running, everyone knows how to use the tool. You've been getting value out of it for a while. There's processes secured in place to make sure best practices are being used. None of those things are in place when someone's starting out. It's first off, what am I doing? Why am I changing? Like you're first probably dealing with people who might not even want you around.
Yeah. Anyone nowadays, when they hear anything about AI, they're a little bit fearful of like, is this replacement or is this repurposing my time to bring more value to the company? So it's always like establishing that with anyone who's part of the audience for modern tooling. So it's building the groundswell. The communication aspect is really, really important when you're talking about adoption and enablement. You still are working with your champions, but you have to be in a state where you're trying to get to their extended network within the organization, and you're trying to hold them accountable to bringing those people to the table, as mentioned. But once you get them, you have to kind of start all over. You want to make sure they understand why this was done at the business level in terms of the executives purchasing the software. You want to anchor them on what are their current processes. This is what we've heard. This is what we worked on during the pre-sales process. Does this extend to you directly? If not, let's run some discovery sessions to understand where your pain points are. What are your top goals? And from there, you then build advisory surrounding that. And that advisory is tied to playbooks. So you have to build standards and repeatable motions, but you want to customize it to the individual team that you're working with. And then think, once you customize it to the individual team, there's 100 teams in that organization that you have to re-customize it to. So again, the big separation is that you have to focus on constraints. You have to focus on individuals who did not make the decision. And then you have to make sure that when you're meeting those individuals, you're meeting them with context and they're understanding and having empathy for what they have to do, but then turning around and making sure that you're effective in what you present to them, how you guide them through the problems that they have.
It's all the things that we typically have not had to think about in pre-sales, really. A lot of what's on everyone's minds right now is how the world of pre-sales is potentially changing into kind of what you're describing, which sometimes it's that forward-facing or forward-deployed engineer. Like, call it what it's will. It's, okay, yes, there's everything you need to do to get things sold, but that's very different from how you think about making a customer successful in the end, because there's so many other things that as you're sitting here listening to these things off, I'm literally sitting here going, I don't think I would know how to approach most of those ideas. I definitely don't have the skill set to do it. Where are you pulling this from? Is this from others who have done it before at your company? Or like, how are you going about building the expertise to know how to do this effectively?
So 2 areas, right? Let's just talk about forward deployed engineers. It's a really exciting title in the space of technical solutions. Why it's exciting? A lot of people want to maintain that engineer title surrounding what they do, but they also like the concept of it's AI native. It's all about realizing value without any bounds or any restrictions in what that individual can do. So it's a world of creativity, but with that creativity comes a lot of credibility you must have as an individual. And by credibility, it goes from I can be a product expert to I am a domain expert. I have an understanding of this domain deeply and understand all the workflows around it. So when I think of forward deployed engineer, I think someone who has practitioner experience in that domain, who has to have dealt with real world constraints and real world implications. So you're usually looking at an engineer if you're dealing with an IDE first product, like the Cursors of the world and whatnot, or you're looking at someone, let's say Ramp is hiring, they call them TAMs as well, but you're looking at someone who has domain experience with dealing with ERP systems and whatnot. That's like a key ingredient when you say forward deployed engineer, somebody who usually has the ability to develop, but also has very credible domain experience. Technical account managers, I think, can be a blend of product experience also with a light level of domain experience. And you can anchor on both sides depending on your hiring strategy for the role. So today, like hiring strategy, I'm running into a lot of folks who have experience with DevOps, have experience with backend integrations, API experience. And I'm like, do they have enough domain experience in the world of product development and building software? Have they worked with product engineers before? So there's this level of domain experience that I'm always looking at when I'm trying to separate what would be a TAM and then what would be a forward deployed engineer.
Taking it one step further, how does that differ from like when you were looking at pre-sales? What's overlapping and what's completely new?
Overlapping is storytelling. Like I am heck bent on people being able to tell a story, lead the room. Overlapping is the ability to discover. If you're going to be in a forward-facing role and you cannot understand what problem a person has because you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to be successful.
I love that. That storytelling and discovery being the thing that we've talked about for so long is so much more important than being able to demo. And here it is as the transferable skill to FDEs and TAMs as well.
Exactly. And that's why some software engineers that like I'm excited about, like, oh my God, you have a full understanding of the development lifecycle from a product engineering perspective, are amazing. And then you realize, but you can't tell a story. You can't connect with people in the room. You can't lead them with their decision making, despite orating, I don't know if that's a word, but sitting there and reading some slides that someone's crafted for you from all the teams that supplement these roles. Are you believable? Do you come across with credibility? Do you come across with passion? Are you mapping the words on paper to their exact scenarios as a customer? So storytelling is critical in any customer-facing role. And I think that's for the engineers who are interested in forward-deployed engineering because they're focusing on the engineering with a capital E. The difference between you being successful and you probably getting passed over for a role and still focusing on back end and competing with building product will be your ability to storytell, your ability to understand and ask people the right questions tied to the domain. Now, on the other side of it, from a pre-sales and post-sales perspective, you can teach people the product knowledge and domain knowledge on the pre-sale side. I think if someone's a fantastic storyteller, has some technical acumen, and has always lean towards the tech and understanding the why behind the tech, they can be in the world of solutions and pre-sales. But they must absolutely understand the tech, how it works, how it comes together, the architectures in the real world, if they're going to get into the forward deployed side or the TAM side of the house. There's not the bandwidth to teach you the foundations of the client environments. You have to be super adaptable and have to have a good wealth of experience understanding the different deployment architectures that exist in some of your organizations. And I think that's the difference. That's how I used to hire on the solutions side when we were thinking about this role needs to handle both pre and post sales. We made a technical depth a big requirement in the hiring process.
I think it's difficult because that's going to change by industry, is right. Well, right. Like what's going to be required for this new role? As you said, I mean, domain expertise becomes such an important part, but it also alleviates a little bit of, I think, angst potentially from people who are trying to think about the role, because some of the things that they've been doing, if you have been focusing heavily on value selling, animal storytelling, et cetera, instead of having to pick up everything around other things people think about with deployment, such as understanding how to code, understanding how to run, like you can teach someone how to deploy technology so long as they have, from what I'm hearing you say, the foundations of the technology there. You can walk them through, here's the scripts you run, here's the things you pay attention to.
Absolutely. Again, one of the early stage properties is curiosity. Always look for that as well, because curiosity will birth the need to understand. And if you have someone who needs to understand something, they will do the work to self-enable themselves. And those are the people that we look for. But yes, you're spot on. You can teach people the tech, but when you're running fast, especially now with all the companies that are in demand trying to hire these roles, they don't have the bandwidth to teach you the foundations. And I think that is a big gap. Fortunately, there's a path for people that get into solutions to go into forward deployed engineering as long as they are self-enabling in areas. I really believe that. I think about some of the people I've managed over my career on the pre-sale side and where they're at today and their ability to navigate any audience, their ability to go deep with credibility with the developer audience versus the design audience versus marketers versus executives who are trying to make that buying decision. That takes time. That takes effort. That's not an overnight thing. And that's not a ChatGPT thing either.
It can help you with research maybe, but it's not going to get you all the way there for sure. Something that you said I want to circle back to, which is about curiosity. I hear this all the time from people, and it's one of those almost hidden threads, I feel like. Not super hidden, but I think hidden enough talent or attribute of someone's personality or their skill set that I think is overlooked. I take back what I said. I don't think it's a talent like a natural talent. I think it's a talent in terms of something that you can develop and build, which is curiosity. Curiosity around technology, curiosity around business, around ideas, being someone who takes the approach of, that's an interesting thought, I wonder how that works. That's an interesting thought, I wonder why that's important to that company. A person who's willing to ask those questions and then willing to do the exploration themselves or ask around or figure it out is a skill set that not every pre-sales person has, but I would say the most successful pre-sales people usually share that trait.
100%. And there's easy ways when you're a hiring manager to like discover that. Because everyone, when you're hiring somebody, will say, oh, I'm always technically curious. Curiosity is one of those tenets that I carry with me as I go into any organization. That's a common answer you'll hear. But then at the end of the interview, you say, hey, do you have any questions? And they're like, oh, no, you were so expressive about the role. I completely understand what's happening. So you can tell people who are curious when they prove it to you. But to go back to prove and prove it to you and try and build parallels to the real world, it's almost like a customer and you have to prove it to them, right? Like it's just, there's this world of like, if you think about sales in general and go-to-market in general, we're navigating from this product understanding to actually outcome-based proof. And I think that when you're communicating with anybody now, to test someone's technical curiosity, they need to prove it. So when you're showing up in that conversation, you need to make sure that you're asking questions about the ecosystem, about the customer base, about the tooling in place. You need to show and prove the technical curiosity just as much as you need to prove how your tool can drive positive outcomes when you're working with a customer. So it's just all about proof nowadays.
Whether it's in the interview process or when you're working with customers, a lot comes out based upon the questions that you ask to a customer. And I think this is true. If you think about if you were to try and hire someone on your team, And when you left the room, if you ask yourself, do I feel like this person actually understands the role that they would be ready for? If the answer is no, that person wasn't curious enough to ask the right questions, which is exactly the same thing that we know as good pre-sales people. If the customer feels like I understand them, they're more likely to want to come back to me. And so it's such an underrated skill set. And it's not that hard to learn. It's not something you're locked out from. You don't have to have this naturally, but just figure out how you can get the person you're talking to understand, I want to know everything I can about what you've got going on, and help me to know how I can know that. Approach your conversation like that, and boom, you're being a curious person. It's not difficult, but it is something that not a lot of people do.
Absolutely. When you see it, though, it's so fantastic. When you're in a coaching call, I shadow so many calls, both on the pre-sales and post-sales side, because at the end of the day, as a leader, I do want to understand how the quality that's being delivered by the people that I'm leading. But when you see it, it's just such an amazing moment when someone double clicks on a small sentence someone said or the tone in the room, and they carefully unpack that scenario. It can be ignored so easily by solution professionals. But when you see that they're able to navigate the tone and say, well, okay, tell me more about that. Simple tools like that, it just unlocks everything.
It's something that we know in the training course, but then it starts to fall apart. But you have to be someone who's willing to listen. I think the biggest example that I would see time and time again is when someone would say, you're doing that early discovery, and the customer starts saying, with the last solution we had, it just didn't really work for us. Okay. And a lot of times salespeople are like, great, their last solution didn't work. They're ready for a new one. And they want to hop right in with, well, here's how we're going to do better. Instead of the curious mind saying, well, why? What was wrong with it? And then they'll say something, I guess, even further, said, it didn't meet our expectations. What would have met your expectations? Like, ask the curious question, as opposed to saying, yeah, totally understand. Like, we tend to go too far on the, oh, I know how you feel. I've been there before. Well, maybe you have. You don't know. You haven't asked the question yet. You've not been curious enough to know if you actually know the situation.
Yeah. And again, it's like the fundamentals to be great both on pre-sales and post-sales. And it's just something that carries forward in any scenario. So it's just curiosity, the ability to discover, the ability to get people talking. It's just, It's critical in role on both sides of the house.
I imagine, especially if you're dealing ever with a customer where maybe the deployment's not quite going the way that it had been sold to them, getting them to open up and actually continue to communicate and talk with you can be just as difficult, if not more so difficult, I'm imagining, than trying to get someone to open up in the first place during a sales call.
Absolutely. And these scenarios come up all the time. The intention of leaders is to pick the right tool for their business and for their individuals. And they pick an amazing team to go out and validate this on the pre-sale side. They're the best of the best. And they plan and they understand everything and they plan this amazing rollout. And then you get to the post-sale side. And we're not dealing with people that were working with this for 3 months. We're dealing with people that this is net new for. And you forget immediately that these people are coming from scratch.
Why am I here? Yeah. Can we just answer that question?
I know we're going circular, but it's just like, it's so critical to understand the differences. That will be a big difference during pre-sales and post-sales. Post-sales, you're dealing with folks that this is the first time they're touching it, and you need to reestablish and discover what their pain point is. And then you absolutely need to show up with credibility, and like they need to respect why they should listen to you. Like, what is the value that you bring to them? Because they're all busy. They have competing priorities, and it's just sometimes their competing priorities are larger than the opportunity that's been positioned for you as an organization. So it's critical to be able to play both sides of the fence with the ability to discover and empathize and get people discussing what their process is.
Question for you, Shamil. Maybe it touches on kind of your personal motivations for this role or how you're seeing it now that you're doing it from a day-to-day basis. A couple of times in my career, I've been interested and intrigued in post-sales. I've thought about it. I'm like, that seems like it would be a fun thing to spend some time doing. I feel like I would get to know how customers work. But every time I looked at it, the advice people would give me is, well, you don't want to go from sales to post-sales. That's going from a value-add role to a not value-add role. Thinking about it now, I'm like, I think everyone in the industry is realizing that's not so much the case, but I feel like there's still a little bit of a stigma there on saying, well, in sales, you're adding to the revenue line, and in post-sales, you're an expense. So how do you think about the role that you're doing or the teams that you're building as far as a career for pre-sales? Like, how does that work? How is that a continuation forward versus how many people have seen it as a step back historically?
It's a valid point, but I think you positioned it well of what I used to think about post-sales. And I do think there's this promise maybe 3 years ago that post-sales is like someone's going to sit there and help you configure the item that you deployed.
That's how everyone's mind is about it, right? You bought it. Now, okay, what do you want to put in here, right?
Post-sales now, with the way that the world of software is going, with utilization being a key way to drive revenue for an organization, is more important than ever. Because again, as I stated earlier, you have an amazing crew that picks the software, but they are not the entire business. You rarely get to touch the entire business when you're selling. Post-sales, you get to touch the entire business, which makes your tool critical to them, which increases the utilization. And then hopefully in the world of AI, you're figuring out a strategy on consumption for that. So post-sales is somewhat the new revenue driver. In addition to that, you have to think about going back to the original process of sales now and going to outcome-based selling. The eval is your moment that every pre-sales person has to think about post-sales, has to think about the constraints of the customer. How do we actually get this in their hands, get them working? How do we understand their exact workflow and where this ROI is going to be realized in that workflow? So for me, from a transition perspective, and again, I'm all about technical solutions, both sides of the fence. I just think that the role is going to be blended over time. But for me, I think that all I'm doing on the post-sales side is I am ramping up that evaluation 100 times. All right. It's the same recipe. It's discovery, understanding where the customer wants to be and where they're at currently, understanding what are the best practices to get them there. For that, based on what you've discovered, advising them by running training sessions or providing reference architectures, and then going around and validating that with them. Did this, in fact, change the way that you work? Do you have a good understanding of what you need to do technically next? Yes, then great. Let's go ahead and close out this engagement and let's move on to the next either group or next business problem. So it's all the benefit for the companies that you get more licensing and hopefully you get more utilization in a new way that everyone's incorporating AI. But we are getting away from the old world of post-sales, which is you click next here. So I think as someone who's coming from the pre-sale side, and the excitement in post-sales is about, you have to deal with the constraints. That's going to suck. There's no way around it. But you still get to touch a lot more of the customer base, and you get to have moments that can help on the pre-sale side as well when it comes to, here are the customer stories that we're able to bring to you. So I was just excited for it. And plus, as I mentioned, 4 years is a long time to do a thing.
I think it's an obvious good step. I love seeing it because it's something that I think I would be more successful looking back if I had known how customers are actually utilizing things better. If I'd been through what the deployment process looks like, I feel like maybe I could have sold it better with that in mind. Like, I feel like there's a lot of things that we've kept siloed, unfortunately. But I think you're also right. Like, this is the way that businesses are changing. We're looking at traditional, like the similar way that we moved from perpetual license to subscription-based pricing, like that move, we're moving from subscription-based pricing to consumption-based pricing. Like, that is the shift that's happening. It's going to overtake SaaS soon. And this is the model for, I think, SEs moving forward, which is to understand you are going to be comped and paid and responsible in some way for the customer using your product. And when all of a sudden you have to not just think about selling it, but make sure that the customer has to use it, that's different. I remember actually once I sold product to a customer and they had a 3-year license. At the end of 3 years, they churned because no one ever deployed it. It sat on their shelf. I still got paid. That would have been an utter failure nowadays, even though it was a success, quote unquote, for a while. And it's not how that's going to work anymore.
Absolutely. I started in solutions in 2012, so I'm aging myself there. But I think about those days, it was all about the big win. And then it's up to the customer to like figure it out.
Yes, it's not your problem.
Yeah. But now, from a pre-sales perspective, I think everyone in the industry is thinking about long-term success for that organization. Whatever their target is they're selling to, I think we all have empathy for them, and we're selling in a way that thinks about what could they realize down the line by leveraging the product. And the beauty of that is they're selling the vision. The constraints and maturity is where things differ. I'm appreciative of like sellers who don't just think about, I need to get the win. They think about, I need to get the customer to realize the value of reaching long-term success, because that can translate all the way down the line. That's like everybody who's part of, whether you're pre-sales or post-sales, if you get the mindset of, I want my customer to be successful, I want them to grow as an organization, they're building software to generate revenue for themselves. They start at the business outcomes, like what are the North Stars there? They then work into departmental vision. They then work into what are the challenges they face. And then from there, what's the solution your product solves? If everyone's thinking about that, then it doesn't matter where the expertise lies, you're heading in the right direction as a sales organization, as a technical solutions organization. So that's what I focus on. Like, take a step back from the win and think about the health of the customer. And if you're thinking about that on the pre-sale side, you're in a really good spot.
I agree. It needs to be in all of our minds. Most of we're almost out of time. And so before we end, I do want to ask you first, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they get in touch with you if they want to maybe chat about this more?
I'm on LinkedIn. I do believe I'm the only Shamil Turner on LinkedIn. So reach out for me. You'll see my awesome professional picture from our sales kickoff last year. Figma's got a pretty good budget for some of these offsites. So I'm always using the professional photos they take there.
I love it. And finally, before we go, what is your final thoughts for us? Maybe it's a hot take. Maybe it's something we talked about before. What thoughts do you want to leave people with?
I think the way I answered the last question is really not a hot take. I just think we need to stop thinking about the immediate win and we need to think about the long-term success. One of the mantras that we always talk about is hire, longer, wider, right? Within every organization. Hire means that your account executives are really focused on meeting at the executive level, bringing the value of the platform to those executives who are just not close enough to the features or like the normal value. Longer, thinking about where is the customer at today and where can they be at in a year, in 2 years, and then wider in terms of, you're working with your champion and you're working directly with the team that will get the most value. But what about folks that can still get value, but it just may not be the perfect thing to solve all their business problems? There's still value there. So we need to target them and we need to have them as part of the conversation of what can be. Those are the things I usually think about. And that's my kind of hot take.
We'll leave it for there. And if you've got any thoughts on that, reach out to Shamil. We'll put his contact there. But yeah, really appreciated having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you for listening to the Presales Podcast by Presales Collective. Did you know that we also post on the Presales Collective blog following each episode? Head there to read through information on shows you might have missed or find another past episode to listen to. For more information on the Presales Podcast itself, and to listen to those past episodes, visit presalescollective.com/podcast.